Maven. Welcome to the channel. And yes, let's get it started for today. I'm giving 3 soulful weekend self-care rituals every Black woman deserves during the weekend. Now, sometimes on the weekends, I'll go live or I'll put up a video for Sundays. Typically, I like to use the weekends to help prepare us and get us set, our mindset on for the upcoming week. Self-care is what we talk about here, empowering Black women, liberating Black women through self-care that is decolonized, i.e. just for us. And so today's live is not going to be super long. I just want to make sure I give you some necessary tools for the weekend to help you get situated for your week, to help you elevate, feel better, look better without the pressure of other people's expectations. We know Black women have way too much on our plates, and 2025 should be about centering ourselves, unpacking the internal stuff that needs to be worked on for our betterment as Black women and people in general. So let's get started. I just wanted to, hark back onto, given the climate that we're in right now, people are concerned. People are concerned about the economy. People are concerned about job security. And so with that in mind, we still need to be doing self-care. We still need to be practicing or implementing decolonized self-care, particularly if you are a Black woman in the United States. Out here in the diaspora, things are super stressful, and we already know that Black women are subjected to stressors that are intersectional. We deal with institutionalized racism, which is also violent in a lot of instances. We also deal with microaggressions in the workplace. So all of these stresses, not just being a Black woman, but existing in a Black body here in the United States, is particularly stressful, and the research, the work has already been done. And so today I wanted to give us something that was a little bit lighter, give tools to help get you started on your self-care journey. And so that's why I wanted to give just 3 things to help you get started on your path to decolonized self-care, because we know the root of everything, the foundation of living your best life, of living a life that is elevated, living a life that is whole and healing and grounding, requires self-care. You can't give from a place of emptiness. You can't give from a place of lack. Resentment comes in, all kinds of pressures. Your life, your health is impacted when you don't self-care. And so, keeping that in mind, if you're a Black woman out there, welcome, welcome, welcome to this space. I'm going to give us 3 things that we need to be doing right now for self-care through the weekend. And these tips I'm going to give anyway are relevant for the whole entire year. But if you don't know where to start in terms of self-care as a Black woman, and you're wondering about, okay, every time I hear self-care, I'm thinking money going out of my pocket. Well, these are self-care tips that are basically not gonna cost you any money. If anything, one of them involves ancestral journaling. I like to call ancestral journaling. And that just requires that you have a journal of some sort. For me, I am someone who loves books, and I love journals. I've always loved journals as a child. I find them magical, and they're great tools for helping you manifest as well. great tools for you to pour out what's going on inside of you internally. They are great for brain dumping. And so I have a number of journals. I am that eclectic crazy bitch who loves to have a journal based on my mood sometimes. So this one here is the one I love to use for what I like to call deep thoughts when I'm doing real connection that involves my own lineage, that involves my deepest, most private thoughts, and my most grounding. And it's something about this old work, leather working, crystal on here as well. The energy that I feel both when I pour out into this kind of a journal, as well as what I'm receiving from it energetically. I find that very helpful. And then I also have another journal for that I like for travel. And this is one I picked up on my last trip. You can see some of my videos where I talked about my self-care journey to Lisbon, Portugal last year. I did that. That was super fun. And it was very grounding at the same time. And it was very eye-opening as well. And so this is one of the journals I picked up while I was there. And mind you, none of these cost a whole lot of money. So what is the point of journaling? As I said before, it requires you this type of journaling. I'm going to go through, there are 3 tips here. First of all, I'm going to go through ancestral journaling, nature grounding, and sacred bath. And those are the 3 tips. None of these things require a whole lot of money. At the most, $10 just to get a journal. And if you already have one, that's money you don't have to spend, right? And so when it comes to ancestral journaling, that's reconnecting with your past, your present, and your future. And it involves you reconnecting with your lineage. Creating little journal prompts where you have personal reflections of conversations you've had with elder women in your lineage, where you talk to them, where you ask for wisdom, or if they're no longer present in your life, this would be a good time to have that imaginary conversation. What are conversations you wish you could have had with your mother or mother figure in your lineage to ask for wisdom, to get their perspective on certain things? If you don't, have someone like that in your life, say for instance, your mom is no longer with you or your grandmother is no longer with you, there are ways to still access that lineage of yours that you carry. You can ask other elders in your family that are women specifically. This is specific to Black women. This requires you tapping into your lineage however you can, whether it's through their own journals. I know I have a collection of, my mom was very gifted as an educator, and she had, during her last time, she had a collection of poems she wrote during a difficult time in her life, towards the end of her life, actually, before she became an ancestor as well. And sometimes I love to, and I have a need to connect with that ancestral lineage on that side of my family. And that's very important in healing. That's something you can do. It helps to open up your sense of awareness, your sense of self. And that's why that type of journaling is very helpful, is very healing, it's very introspective, and it forces you into a level of awareness and connection that you don't typically get when you just journal. Say, for instance, you do a brain dump. The next thing is nature grounding and, a walking meditation, essentially. What this typically requires that you do is go out into nature. Nature, by definition, the wilds, being out in nature, is very healing. It's very liberating because it is not confined or controlled. It is the epitome of decolonization in a sense, because it's nature, it's wild, it's free. And being able to tap into that energetically is healing and centering as well. That is something that I advise everyone to do. I do that on occasion. I don't go into a nature walk all the time. If for whatever reason you're unable to access, say, your local park or your local wildlife preserve, then by all means, these are things you can create this sense even in your own household. You can create that sense of a wild gardening grounding. You can create that in your home garden, and that doesn't cost anything either. On that topic of plant life and wild gardens, I am a huge advocate of, if you have a garden, making sure as much as possible that the plant life is native and it's indigenous to that region. I find it very discomforting and superficial, artificial, when I encounter plants in a certain space and they're not native to that space. And remember, we as people practicing decolonized self-care, it's important that you maintain that connection to indigeneity, to what is right, what is in alignment. And things being alignment means things being native to a place, connected to a place. And so it's possible to create that feeling even in your own home garden if you don't have access to, say, a botanical garden that specializes, or park that it features a variety of plant life that is native to that area. The point of the matter is, you want to touch ground, you want to touch grass, you want to touch earth, and you want to do that because there's a grounding effect. I remember as a kid, we used to, and this is back, not here, this was back on the continent when I was a kid, running around when it was raining and everything, and there was something so energizing and enlivening about running, in the yard, in the neighborhood, barefoot in the middle of a tropical rains. You felt the earth, you felt the heat rising up, and the water just, it's a cleansing effect. And so there's something very powerful, especially for us as a people who are practicing decolonized self-care, to tap into these forces because they are particularly healing and nourishing for us. And so that's the second little tip that you can begin to implement in terms of having a soulful self-care weekend. Remember, this is about being soulful and decolonized in your self-care for the weekend. You don't want to do a whole lot. You don't need to do a whole lot. You don't need to spend money for any of these activities that I am laying out here. The last one I'm going to talk about is giving yourself a sacred bath or foot soak. And that typically would be like turning your bathroom into a sanctuary. Now, I needed a bit of tea because for me, tea is very healing and nourishing and nurturing for me as well. And that's actually part of my self-care this weekend. I am practicing that even as I'm on live here talking with you about that. Sacred bath, sacred foot soak. Those These things that we do, a bath, how does a bath become sacred? A bath becomes sacred when you make sure that you incorporate the elements that call to you spiritually, emotionally, and physically, that are, you bring collective, that carries the collective memory of who you are, what appeals to you. It is the ultimate in terms of safety, utilizing special salts, special herbal mixtures in baths. I remember too as a kid, like when any of us got sick as kids, there was a little healing I recognize now, not at the time when I was a child. I didn't recognize it as such. All I knew is that it made me feel better. It made me feel protected. It made me feel nourished. But it was something typically like if you had done something super strenuous throughout the day or you were recuperating from illness. I remember sometimes when we got sick, a lot of times kids, I living in the tropics, particularly in Nigeria at that time, we used to get malaria like basically like it was the common cold. And so my mom always used herbal remedies and rituals to help us stay healthy, stay on the mend. And looking back now, I used to think, oh my God, this tastes horrible. If it was some herbal mixture she was forcing us to drink, or some sacred bath like this, which was basically a healing bath with sometimes it involves salts. If you a practitioner of the hoodoo from the Black diaspora, if that's something you're familiar with, you understand the elements of that, that is also something that can be adapted for this as well on a smaller scale as part of your weekend self-care practice and routine. And I'm, again, like I've said before in previous videos, I make it a point on these open platforms not to go into the particulars of any of our decolonized and indigenous cultural practices online, because I believe that this is a time we need to start gatekeeping. I don't know who else saw the plantation burning. I was like, yay for the ancestors. And I fully support that. I fully support all of them burning down, but that's a whole nother story. But back to self-care. So I've given you 3 soulful weekend self-care rituals you can practice going forward if you don't have a self-care practice. Also in the description, I have a number of helpful links and tips that you can utilize. I have a free self-care guide in there on my website. There are also resources at freedomatthecrossroads.com. You can also book a strategy session as well if that's something that you need. It's an intensive. It can be draining because it's intensive. So those are things I typically require people to prepare for before booking those with me, because there's a questionnaire involved with that as well. But that's a whole nother thing. If you are getting some benefits from these sessions with me, from these lives and my videos, please hit the subscribe button. Subscribe to my channel, the newsletter. I'll have all of that is available to Black women everywhere, regardless of where you are in the world. I believe Black women need to be uplifted, protected, healed, and thriving, and above all, liberated and living undomesticated globally. We live in an age now where patriarchy, it's going through its extinction burst. And so the level of stresses that are put on women, particularly Black women, is heavy. But there are ways to unplug from that. There are ways to say, I am done, I am signing off, and I'm opting out of the hamster wheel going nowhere, also known as patriarchy, misogyny, white supremacy, and all the things that impact us negatively as Black women. It's time for us to begin thriving. And part of that, at the root of that actually, is us as Black women practicing, laying hold of, reclaiming self-care, the decolonized version, because what's out there in mainstream media is not built for us. And I continue and will continue to stress the fact that it is in fact harmful to us as Black women. It is harmful to us as a community when we use these things that weren't built for us because they are, by their very nature, commodifications and bastardizations of ancient practices that were stripped from their cultural context and history and knowledge. And that has happened to a lot of our own self-care practices that have been pulled in, i.e., what was it, a group we're calling on TikTok, a certain demographic we're calling the clean girl aesthetic. What? Yeah, that's a whole nother thing. So I need us as Black women to, I'm going forward and I'm going on record as saying, we need, when it comes to decolonized self-care, if we're going to maintain and protect the integrity of our own rituals, particularly involved with our health and wellness, which are very polarizing in the society in which we're moving in, because anti-blackness, one, is global, so is racism. And we as a people collectively, both on the continent and in the diaspora, these are realities we're going to be navigating for a while. And in order for us to thrive and be truly liberated and grounded and whole as people, particularly as women, we need to gatekeep our sacred practices around something so foundational as self-care. Self-care is the root of life, the root of being, the root of our liberation as women and as a people. Because with self-care comes the building out of things such as boundaries, creating safe spaces, taking ownership, self-advocacy, embracing autonomy. All of those things are packed in and founded on self-care, decolonized self-care. And that also requires a level of self-awareness. And this is why practices like this, just these simple practice here that I'm talking about today, these soulful weekend these basic 3 self-care rituals for Black women that will not cost you money, at the very least, at the most, maybe $10. The cost of a journal that you can get at the dollar store. For me, I'm an eclectic bougie bitch on a budget, and I love, these are both journals I picked up on my self-care getaway slash, what do you want to call it, hunt for a new abode overseas, because I do talk about, as I mentioned in my previous video, I will be talking more about moving abroad as a Black woman and preparing for that and processes around that. And as a women's self-care and health coach for Black women, it's important that I and others around me understand the importance of what that process will look like. And I, being in the industry that I'm in, which is self-care, health and wellness, and having a background in healthcare, it is critical. Anybody that's thinking about moving abroad as a Black person, particularly as a Black woman, it is imperative that you do the internal self-care work. And it starts with the basics like this. And that's why I'm going to be talking a little bit more about what that looks like. I'm on my own journey. I know that self-care will forever be a journey as long as you walk this earth, because what? Your self-care should be adaptive and it should evolve according to your needs. One of the problems we are experiencing now as a collective, particularly as Black women in the Black community, we have adopted strategies that were working in the short term and arguably up until, say, the last 20, 30 years, but they've become super maladaptive, and it's time to decouple from that, and it's time to decenter a lot of things that we've been holding on to that are impacting us in negative ways. And I've talked about that and alluded to that in a number of previous videos where I spoke on the issue of existing in Black bodies and how our liberation, our self-care will always be political in a society that is built on oppression, racism, white supremacy, patriarchy, misogyny, all the negative, ugly things, all the oppressive entities and structures. Our self-care, unfortunately, will always be political. Now, I need us also to understand, too, that while that may be the case, there's nothing that says it's an impossibility. It is more than possible. It just requires you as a Black woman and as a Black person to be strategic about this. There's certain ways to navigate this, specifically if you're navigating issues in the workplace. And I hearkened back to this in the other day when I talked about, well, how do you access, certain amenities that are, for the most part, expensive when it comes to your self-care, your health and wellness, especially mental health. Healthcare in the United States is pretty much the most expensive healthcare in the Western world. In the Western industrialized world, our healthcare is the most expensive, arguably the most expensive, and we get the least for the money we spend. And it's kind of hard to wrap your head around that truth, but that is the case. I found that out in my own travels. I found that out from people who are expert in the fields, who live outside of the country as Black people, particularly Black women in communities around the world. This is the truth. Outside of this, there are researchers within this country and outside this country that support that same truth. So you cannot escape the fact that that is a reality. Now, when you add in the fact that medical racism is a thing, I mentioned in another video this young doctor who's now a doctor, actually. He blew up on TikTok in his expose on medical racism. Joel Barville, I believe. He's done a lot of work and he's really making an impact. He's super gifted and very, very knowledgeable. And he's doing a lot of good work and education around medical racism and what that looks like for Black people and people of color. And so that aside, if nothing else, that should let you know how important self-care is for us as Black people. For Black women, it is particularly empowering when you practice decolonized self-care, because it requires you also to learn how to reclaim your voice, how to advocate for yourself, how to take what you need. And in instances where you might feel you need to ask for it, ask for what you need. Some of that involves community care, mutual aid, supporting one another. If no one is an island, we are community-based people. Humans thrive in the midst of community, reciprocity, and grounding. And living in this society has conditioned us to doing the opposite, which is one of the reasons why we're so impacted from a health perspective too, because this is not us. None of this stuff was built for us. It was built on our labor, blood, sweat, and tears, and the horrors and trauma of our ancestors, but it was not built for us. And that's why the version of self-care that's out there, that's popularized in mainstream media, all of the media platforms, by people who don't look anything like us, telling all these stories and trying to sell you something, that's not built for us. If you today, as a Black woman, are saying, okay, I know I need to do something about, my exercise, getting my heart rate up, doing that kind of thing. Be sure that you're in a place that supports and gives a supportive and safe energy. And I argue, and I will stand on 10 toes and say this again. There are very few, if any, spaces that are that are not black or POC that are healthy for you to be in when you're, especially when you're practicing some form of self-care like exercising. If you are the only one in a yoga studio who looks like you in a room full of other people, please tell me how that's healing for you. I will keep asking that question till I get an answer that makes sense, because I'm here to tell you you don't. Because part of self-care and leaning into that and getting healed and really getting nurtured requires a sense of safety and a level of vulnerability that you cannot present in a space that you inherently know in your soul, in your spirit, in your body, by the blood of the ancestors that you share in your lineage. There is no way you can sit up in a yoga studio full of white women with all their microaggressions directed at you in one way, shape, or form. There's no way you can tell me that laying up or sitting up in the midst of that you're getting healed and relaxed. You're not. And so I want you to sit with that. But to end today, because I don't want to go on too long, this was not designed to be a long session or a long drawn out session, self-care session, because it's the weekend and this is self-care weekend. And I believe in self-caring because I have plans myself to do some more journaling. These are my journals. For this one, I feel particularly, speaking of journals again, I don't know, it's something about this one. I picked it up in Lisbon in the oldest, the library, not the library, but the bookstore, the oldest practicing, I guess, bookstore in the world. I got this there, and I saw this journal, and it was something about it that spoke to me. It has a crystal piece in it, and it's handmade paper. And I like to use these for my deep thoughts when I'm feeling like I need to connect with some lineage people. So I'll leave it there. But ancestral journaling is a thing. It's something I think we need to get more into and embrace more for our mental health as well, but also from a manifestation perspective as well. There's some tie-in with doing mood boards and also doing, you know, some manifestation again, and I'm going to leave it there. Again, that is healthy. It helps you gain clarity. It helps you decompress, and it helps you to access a space beyond what you're seeing right now. Again, I also spoke on the importance of nature grounding, walking out in nature, connecting, touching grass somewhere, whether that's your backyard or whether that's your local park district. Do that. There is something inherently soothing and nurturing about that because nature speaks to us on a deep and primal level. And there's a level of healing that only happens when you do that. There's research associated with grounding as well. This is not the video for that, but trust me, I've done it. Other people have done it. It's out there. You can research that on your own if you need more clarity on that. Also, I also talked about the sacred bath or foot soak with doing it with intention of cleansing, intention of releasing. There's a lot of overlap spiritually with that. There are also ancestral practices related to hoodoo and other practices in the diaspora that speak to that whole sacred bath. If you're someone who's always on the hustle run, and remember I said before too, I consider hustle part of white supremacy. Some researchers also support that as well. Imagine that. But anywho, as I was saying, there's something relaxing and enveloping about that. Remember, even in the womb, the baby is, we have that memory, even though it's buried so deep in us, of that safety of being in a warm, enveloping, soothing, protective fluid. And that's where the water comes in as well. Water is cleansing, water is healing, water is soothing. When you add in ancient herbs that, or access the knowledge of ancient herbology, that also adds another layer on that. And you can use the funny thing, I want to say it's funny, but it's not, it's funny, but it's not funny. There is something to be said for, how we as Black people love our spices and herbs. That's a thing globally, wherever we are on the planet, we have connection to that. And a lot of other indigenous, African, Black, POC, whatever you want to call it, cultures have that thing about herbs and the sacredness and the healing properties of that. And that's how we get a lot of things too, like certain perfumes, incense, things of that nature. But you can add soothing herbs to, and essential oils to your sacred baths or foot soaks. You can, if you don't have a bathtub, there's a way around that. You can do the foot soak version of that, but you also want to make sure you do it with intention. Some people use certain crystals in that water as well as part of that bath process that they create. There are a number of versions of this depending on your need, depending on your intentions around that. And so again, I'm not going to go too deep in that because we got to gatekeep stuff. So having said that, it's a super easy. Usually those herbs and spices, most of us have rosemary. Most of us have thyme or cardamom or cinnamon or some other spice or herb or lavender in our kitchen somewhere. So those are things you don't have to spend a lot of money on. You can order a lot of these things, the dried herbs. You can order a lot of this from places like Etsy, or you can even grow them. Rosemary, you can get that from your local garden center, or, a neighbor that perhaps you can swap herbs. Like I know sometimes, like I have a colleague at work who knows I love rosemary, and I'm always looking for it, rosemary, small rosemary plants, because I don't have a huge garden. I have a terrace garden, so I like to get fresh herbs, and sometimes she'll bring me stuff if I don't have it, or the reverse. And so those herbs, you can speak intentions over them. You can add them to your bath. They all have healing properties anyway. Rosemary, thyme, sage, lavender, chamomile. All of these things can be added to your baths to give you the healing and nurturing and create that environment of healing that's necessary without any real cost to you. So again, sacred baths or foot soaks, outdoor grounding, ancestral journaling. Those are 3 things you can do this weekend that will not cost you more than $10. Imagine that, ladies. Not more than $10. Super simple, if even that. A lot of us have herbs and spices in our kitchens that we, use on the daily and are not even aware of the properties that they embody. So it's important to start learning about these things. And again, reclaiming this knowledge is really important for us, for healing, for self-care in general. So having said that, thank you for tuning in. Those of you who tuned in, I will be going live again sometime next week. Stay tuned. Again, hit the follow. Follow my channel here. Tune into the resources. Avail yourself of the resources. If you have questions, leave it in the comments. And I'll get to the comments. I'll get to the questions. And if I don't know the answer, I will definitely point you in the right direction. So this is Tonier. I am the Self-Care Maven, and thank you for watching. I hope you got some knowledge here and some help. So till next time, bye.